And I had to get Chad, Brian, and Jason, the two divers.
Was he in the boat?
I'll give up on red lights.
They were on a pontoon boat, and I guess the wind blew
There's
it
not
away,
one of them
tried
in the
to
city
jump
got
to
the
the
sensors
dock.
working, nothing. It's just,
I can only surmise he must have hit his head.
I
Never
don't
came
get the
up.
little seat.
Is he alone?
No, yeah, his buddy went up.
What'd Tony do for you this
He's the
time?
one that called him in.
I saw that on my phone.
35 feet.
I pulled it up and I said, "Ooh, that's over in the
Hey,
village."
full
I think
color
everybody in
too.
here shut down.
Pictures.
Yeah. Paid for by taxpayers.
Regular stuff.
So I was the closest EMA
Yeah,
person,
nobody weighs
so
anything.
What's the happening thing in
How long
Tucson?
did it take to see?
Especially if they're
I'll
I
have to
probably got there at 20
That's
to
nuts.
3. By the time I got Chad and the two
You're in the
divers,
city. Everybody in the
about
city gets
3:30,
burned.
we left at 3:30.
When he was running for state rep, everybody in Telco Village got
Kinda
one.
scary.
49, I think.
Oh my God.
Paid for by Lenore City.
Just a kid in my country.
Good job you get away with it.
That's young.
I just got their salary, their 2021 salaries. Amber's 105 now.
Dang.
Tony's 80.
Okay, we got Kelly here. Kelly, how you doing?
I hadn't had any in
That's just,
I would
that's
also
the
look
city
into that. I'd ask
mayor.
for that.
Get the utility, he also gets the
No, I
money.
mean Amber's, she don't have anything to do with you too.
Oh, no, that's just her city part, she owns utility.
So you're doing the whole summer to make up for, or, no?
Rain tax, rain tax.
That's not bad.
It's the highest
That's not
million
bad.
a year.
That won't do what they're doing.
They borrow a lot of money. They're in debt, they're eyeballs.
Somebody's going in there in big debt, so it would
He's saying, I keep hearing he's gonna run for Calfee's seat.
He'll be in our district one.
Well, it don't matter, he's whichever district he needs to be in. Did you ever hear any more about McNally? Cause I heard McNally changed his mind, he's gonna stay in.
I've not heard that from anybody. I still only heard that he's retired.
Yeah, I don't say. That was the last one. I don't know what that's about.
Channel take that.
Maybe, yeah.
Him resign, that would be Anderson County.
In fact, I'm in the county on Saturday. No. I just tried to do this thing.
So he's already committed not to run this guy. Of course, Jimmy will weaken Anderson County because of what? 75% of Anderson County, I think, isn't it? Not nothing right now.
There's two county commissioners in a row.
It's,
come in here with her.
I don't think nothing local. He's still got state level stuff on him.
Tammy coming back?
Yeah, she had to go get her purse and today.
About that mayor's job. Oh, I hate that.
Always, friends, always in
Pay a
here.
whole lot more. And
Oh,
he's
no, I'll
actually
tell you what
got
happened on accident.
Huh?
It was a total accident.
You don't need
Now, for Valentine's Day, the
Prestige
little schools
wise,
teachers said we couldn't bring in big treats, but we could bring in individual treats.
representatives, nothing.
So I ordered little campus baggies that put each kid's name on the bag.
Monroe County.
And I ordered boxes of candy. On the Amazon description, it just said,
That's not happening, I've already
boxes,
talked
three,
to her.
you know, I thought it was smaller boxes. No, no, no.
Yes.
But as
She's
far
gone.
as everything
Per
about,
box.
it's not
So I had
The
five
Monroe
he
County
said.
School
boxes
Director.
of
They
random
bought her
candy in the
out.
house
Now
now.
Mitch just turned around and said he's gonna run now.
Hey,
He'll get involved.
Yeah, hey, anybody in your school need
He'll
some
make
candy?
everybody mad.
think your email right here. I went ahead
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't love it.
I think you need to put in your.
I listened to the Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
Which
App
side?
on there, so maybe it's.
I saw she picked it up and done something cute. I forget what it was.
Friday, I guarantee you. I've never poured my roast one like this. I poured my child feed.
How old is he?
They just turned 8.
You ready, buddy?
Yeah. Fine. I'll catch it. I'm gonna get Tammy to her seat.
We got Tammy.
Well, I still need to see you before we get done tonight. My whole time got interrupted by that.
All right.
It's a high
If I
tech
can,
company.
I'm gonna call the Loudon County Commission Special Workshop to order. And it'll be 4:31 for March 22nd, 2021. This meeting is called for the Fort Loudon Medical Center and a transaction related to the expansion of the facility. Does anybody from the general public wish to speak about that one item? Step to the podium and state your name.
Henry, if I could say something before that, you said workshop. Is this a meeting or?
Workshop.
It's a workshop. It was
Public notice is
advertised
wrong.
as a workshop. It was supposed to be a special call, but it's a workshop.
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Okay,
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
yeah.
I would like to go on the record tonight. I talked to Jeffrey Pike, I've talked to Dennis Rowe, I've talked to Travis Estes, I've talked to Dr. Guider. I've taken this very seriously, and I think it can be a win-win situation for the county and most importantly, for the citizens of this county. Therefore, I would offer my support for this tonight.
Okay. All right, Cammy, did you get the roll?
Brewster. Here. Mears.
Here.
Hurley. Here. Tinker.
Here.
Satterfield.
Here.
Whitfield.
Here.
Cullen.
Here.
Duff.
Here.
Shaver.
Here.
Waller.
Anyone wish to address the commission concerning this one issue? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Bob Bowman, lead off the meeting and tell us what's on the agenda here and where we're going.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, as you know, this workshop is being held to consider an agreement to expand and improve Fort Loudon Medical Center. Covenant has proposed to expand the current Fort Loudon Medical Center with the understanding that the property which is currently owned by Loudon County would be deeded to Loudon, to Covenant, in exchange for its promise to build, make those certain improvements to the property. We were provided, my firm was provided a copy of the agreement, which you have now been provided with as well. And I asked my law partnership then, who has experience in not only real estate matters but the healthcare industry, to review the document. And from a lawyer's perspective, there were 4 or 5 issues that we thought needed to be revised. We submitted those revisions to Doug Campbell, the attorney for Covenant. He's been very gracious in working with Chip in making those changes. And the things that the lawyers had issues with were issues about warranties and representations in the agreement, some identification language, essentially the rededication of certain restrictive covenants which already apply to the property, and also the concept of including a right of first refusal in those restrictive covenants in the event that covenant later decides to sell that facility, that the county have an option to purchase it if it wished. So from the lawyer's perspective, the current draft of the document you have is very good shape, we believe, from the county side as far as liabilities and rights and remedies. So we feel comfortable with the legalese part of the agreement. I know many of you probably have questions about Covenant's intentions, why this is necessary, and Mr. Jim Vandersteeg, who's the president CEO of Covenant, is here, and I think he has a brief presentation to give to you all, and then I think the appropriate open for questions that the commission may have, Mr. Vandersteeg.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the commissioners and to the mayor for allowing us to spend a couple of minutes with you this afternoon. I will pre-apologize. I moved to this area of the state. I came from Memphis, and I thought I had all the allergies I would ever have from that end of the state. I've been here, it's hard to believe, almost 14 years, and so my voice occasionally with the allergies. But I want to tell you thank you for letting us come here, and I know we've been working together for the last really several months to kind of look forward to the future for Loudon Medical Center. Obviously, this has been, and I can tell you from a Covenant perspective, this has been a very, very positive relationship. We have enjoyed having you all as partners to us, and from the discussions I've had today, I think it's been a mutually beneficial relationship. It's interesting, Jeffrey was reminding me that we actually built the hospital back in 2004, but actually had a longer standing relationship than that. So there's very few relationships I know that are 40 years old, but we're in about a 40-year-old relationship between our organization and this county. And when the original lease was put together, so again, you know the details of the lease, it was an original 20-year lease, and it has 2 5-year options, and so basically a 30-year lease. In that document, it stated that Covenant would spend at least $7 million during the life of the lease. I will tell you, we spent $20 million during the life of the lease. We spent that $20 million in the first 7 years. And one of the things I hope that shows you, and Jeffrey, if there's a lot of detail we can answer. We spent tens of millions. In fact, Jeffrey, do you know how much total we spent to date?
It's probably somewhere bordering 45 million.
45 million. And so what we haven't done is we've never used the lease as a way to say, hey, how much do we have to spend? We've spent what we needed to spend in the community. If you look at where we are today, Jeffrey, again, if I can, I know all of y'all know Jeffrey very well. As the leader, he's done a really nice job, excuse me, of making sure we understand, what are the needs of the community, what are the needs in terms of recruitment of physicians, staff, what are the technologies we need, and I know Jeffrey well enough to know if you ever want a tour, Jeffrey will definitely give you a tour. But as Jeffrey and I have been talking really for the last several years and looking at the hospital, as you know, we have 25 beds and we have semi-private rooms. And there are many occasions to where patients end up in semi-private rooms. And I would imagine you would answer this question very similar to me. If you had a choice to be in a room by yourself when you're sick with your family, by yourself or with another person in the room, most of us, not all of us, I'm quite certain, would choose to be in a private room. And so Jeffrey and I have been in this discussion for a pretty long period of time about what do we do. And as we were looking at kind of our next phase of things that we need to do from a medical perspective in the community, what we knew we needed to do is we needed to be in a position where we could provide mostly private rooms. And the reason I say mostly is, as you all again may know some of the details of what we've been talking about, we're talking about adding a wing, a 25-bed private wing. The current wing, which is 25 beds, has semi-private rooms. And the reason I say mostly is, obviously, we won't take the stuff out of the walls in case we had a pandemic like we just recently had. If we needed more rooms, we want to have the flexibility of having more rooms. But we would put our hospital in a position that it would be a very, very rare occasion where someone would get a private room. As we looked at that, obviously that's not inexpensive. It's somewhere between 12 and 14, maybe $15 million to build that. And obviously we're in a lease with the county on the hospital proper. And from a financial perspective, I can't imagine going to my board, excuse me, and telling them I wanted to spend the $15 million or $14 or $15 million on something that we don't own. So we thought maybe we could find, excuse me, a win-win here. And we think we have found that. A win-win is the commitment that Covenant would make, obviously a legal commitment, to expand the hospital, 25 additional private rooms. We would spend whatever dollars associated with that. And as part of that, we would move the hospital from being a leased facility to a fully owned facility by Covenant Health. Obviously, it is, if you look at the hospital, if you look at the strategies we're talking about, and I know, Mayor, you mentioned in a brief conversation that we had, is that you talked to some other mayors that are in other parts of the state that are not in the position you are in terms of owning your hospital and some of the challenges you have in trying to own and run a hospital. Obviously, with the commitment we're making here, this is long-term. We plan on being here long-term. And so I wanted to come here tonight as the CEO of Covenant Health and tell you strategically that we think this is a very, very important part of our organization. When we look at who we serve 23 counties, and this county is one of those counties that are all very, very important to us. While we have our biggest acute presence in Knoxville in terms of numbers of beds, all of the organizations, all of the communities we serve are all held in the highest level of regard. And so what we do here is important for the future. I'm not gonna, I can go into any more detail you want to, but I wanted to come tonight and kind of tell you a little bit of our story, get an opportunity to interact with you, whatever questions you have. Again, as stated, Jeffrey Fike, who is our Chief Administrative Officer for the hospitals here, Mr. Doug Campbell, who is our internal legal counsel, is here tonight as well. And I feel quite confident we can answer whatever questions you want. So with that, Commissioner, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, I'll open it up to the commissioners for any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, I've got just a couple or three, and I'll start off by saying I support it. I don't have an issue with it whatsoever. My first would be, I was here in 2004 when we did this. I don't remember why we did what we did.
You're not the only person.
I remember being told it was a good idea. I'd only been here for a couple of years. This is a good idea. We're gonna build this great place and we're gonna give it to the county. We went out and had a ceremony, and we cut tapes and ribbons and toured. To this day, I don't understand why that happened. Can you enlighten us on that?
So I wasn't here at the time, but I do know a little of the history, and Doug Campbell, some of us may be able to answer better. But I do know at the time when we were looking at the hospital, in fact, it's interesting, you almost did, and maybe you are asking this question, why in the world would Covenant spend this money, build this, and not own it? And I wasn't here at the time. In fact, the average daily census back then was four patients. And I can assure you, average daily census of 4, you cannot financially make a hospital work. I know at the time there were certificate of need issues, which is a process that you have to go through with the state. I think there were some competitive issues in the community. I think it was a way for the county, again, to get what it needed, which was an upgraded hospital, a new hospital, which obviously the ability to recruit additional physicians, staff, and a way for Covenant to really earn what we thought over time we would earn, which is a real positive relationship with the community. Doug, I don't know if there's any more detail of, why from the very beginning it was a lease. That's, again, being a new person to Knoxville, only 14 years, that's the history that I know.
You captured it well, I think.
In other words, y'all don't know either, right? That's what I hear.
The sad part is, I was actually involved in the transaction.
I've seen your name on documents. I talked to her.
And just so that it's clear for the public here that doesn't know.
They're all zoomed into us, hundreds, thousands of them.
The Covenant, where the current hospital is located, Covenant purchased the land.
That's right.
And deeded it to the county.
That's right.
And the county leased it back, so.
Yes.
It's
A
not like,
warranty deed, not even a quick claim, it's a warranty deed.
Yeah. So.
I guess it stays a mystery. All right, my next one, in the, most everything's history except this document right here, and that's the agreement to expand document. That's kind of the meat of the potatoes, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Item number 8. That can jump out without me having to read it or anything. That's where the county's gonna pay all our own fees and legal fees and stuff. My question would be, since we're not really asking to do this and we're going to incur fees,
We've already agreed to pay.
say it again?
We've already agreed to pay them.
Okay, it's still in the document though.
A very, very good question.
Okay.
But I thought I would save you from having to read it.
You
further.
say if that one's done, I'm a happy guy.
Yes, we've agreed to pay the legal costs.
I'll go back to predate some information. I go back with Keith Altshuler when he was the administrator of the old hospital. Covenant, prior to the old hospital closing and moving to Lenore City, they were putting in about $75,000 to $100,000 a month just to keep it operational over here in Loudon. And a lot of people don't know that. Covenant has had a very strong relationship and a very strong concern for healthcare in this county.
And I appreciate your comments. And if you also, you kind of think about Covenant, we're a not-for-profit. What we do is not a money-making venture that gets money into stockholders' And by the way, there's nothing mad about having stock, but I'm guessing everybody in this room has some stock. We wanna be able to do that, but we're not for profit. Every thing that we make, all is poured back into the hospitals and the communities we serve for healthcare. And so, when you think about it, this is what we do. What we do is we provide healthcare to communities. And so, obviously, this was something that made a tremendous amount of sense for Covenant. We've been able to do some really exciting things together, which I think have improved the care to the communities we serve. One of the more exciting ones is our stroke program. And you think about, wasn't many years ago that a patient could easily come into a hospital, maybe sit in a waiting room having a stroke, not being identified, and maybe 30, 45 minutes later, come back, your doctor could see them, maybe even very concerned, okay, this is a stroke. And many times what they would do is they put them back in an ambulance and send them to a higher acuity hospital. When you think about the brain is similar to the heart from the perspective, when it doesn't get blood, it dies. And so several years ago, including at Fort Loudon, what we put in together is a neural stroke service, which not only at the hospital do they quickly identify when someone is having a stroke. So if someone comes in, they know how to identify stroke. They do not go back to the waiting room. They come immediately back into the emergency room. And then we connect the emergency doctor to someone who's at Fort Sanders Region, who's on 24/7, 365, who's a specialist in neural stroke. They can talk to the patient if they can talk. They can visually see the patient. What we're doing now is we're actually starting clot busting drugs at the time, if it's appropriate, at that site. So at Fort Loudon, instead of again the patient getting back in the ambulance while that brain tissue is dying, we many times now we're actually we're dealing with a clot. If the clot is something that can't be dealt with there, then we give them to Fort Sanders Regional, and we have some doctors who actually can go, believe it or not, into your brain and pull a clot out. I say all that to say, it's not just about having facilities. It's about connecting those facilities in a way that we can improve the quality of life, improve the health of the communities we serve.
All right, just a couple more and I'm
Yes,
done.
sir.
In the original lease contract, item 7.2.15, and we really wrestled with this one in 2004 and 2002, indigent care. There's no mention in the new contract of any kind about indigent care, and we all care about indigent care, but where the county has a lot of interest in indigent care is inmates in our jail. Is there any provision available? I mean, this is a valuable asset that we own right here. Is there anything available to us to help us with our jail population?
Yeah, absolutely, and again, if you want more detail, Mr. Fike can come up and explain it, but I do remember not that many years ago, Jeffrey, we had a particular inmate that has gotten real expensive.
Yes.
And we worked together to figure out a solution, which was basically an agreed upon percent of charges. And I don't know if that's codified ultimately in the agreement, how we do it is codified in the agreement.
In the new one?
In the existing agreement, there is a current agreement. I'm sorry.
There was an agreement entered between Fort Loudon Medical Center and Loudon County on the 24th day of June 2014 related to the cost.
That was the sick guy, right?
Well, if you remember, so just a little history. In the 2013-2014 timeframe, there was a prisoner at the jail who had a heart attack, and he was transported to Fort Loudon Medical Center, and then ultimately, I think, sent to Park West. And the county, by state law, is responsible for that person's medical bills. And that bill got up to $200,000. Covenant actually filed suit in Knox County against Loudon County to collect that $200,000 bill. I got the case dismissed in Knox County because it had been proper venue, but it got refiled and transferred down to Loudon County. And so we were really in a tough fight with Covenant over that $200,000. I was relying on that very provision that Commissioner Schaefer mentioned to try to beat that $200,000 number down as low as possible. And I think it was Commissioner Duff that brought that provision to my attention, and it was very helpful. Now, at some point, an agreement was reached to settle that case for $50,000. I wasn't a party to that, agreement, but it was reached, and apparently also at the same time, Loudon County and Covenant entered into this agreement whereby Fort Loudon Medical Center agreed to charge no more than, I think, 33% of their standard charges for the jail. I wasn't involved in the negotiation of that agreement. I don't know if county commission approved it. I don't know.
I've never heard, what date was that?
June 24th, 2014. I don't know any.
It was before I came back on this time, so it could have been the previous commission. I've never seen that or heard that
I
document.
saw the agreement for the first time last week, so I think the point that Covenant would like to make about this is they've already agreed that they are only going to charge 33 1/3% of their standard charges for any jail inmate that comes up there. So, I don't know if that's their lowest and best rate, whether they're willing to.
This would be a good day to negotiate that, Ray, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I was, you were correct. I was elected by the county commission to represent the county commission in the negotiations with the Covenant. I was the go-between. What happened at the meetings, I reported to the county commission, and there was only one issue, and you hit on it there a few minutes ago. The issue was from the county commission, led by then chair of it.
Henry Bledsoe.
He passed away, I believe, here
Right.
a couple of months ago. The only issue that county commission gave me to present in this negotiation, well, we went in one night. Of course, Harvey Sproul was represented the attorney at all of our meetings, and there was a member of the community at Tellico Village that had lived some hospital in Kentucky. He represented it, and he was placed on the committee because he was very, very knowledgeable about it. The committees, your committees from Covenant came in with the document that's that thick. I'm sure you've seen it. I asked one question. Have you included the indigent people? You were paying it when it was in Loudon. And is it in, this is the first time I had seen the document, is that included? Those four people that was the negotiating committee for Covenant said, no, it is not there. And I said, county commission will not accept this if it isn't included in there. And they said, well, you're right. We won't accept it. They accepted it, so they picked their stuff up and left. They walked out of the meeting at that time. And of course, I called all of the then sitting county commission and told what had happened. Well, the next morning, Harvey Sproul called me and said they have accepted it. They've sent me a word that they will include it. And if you'll look at the first one, which was what, 17 years ago, they have one sentence in there that they will pay for all indigent. Now, you're correct in that the fellow that was in the jail came to the jail, and it turned out he had a heart condition, and they transferred him to the hospital up the road. And, there's where the rub came. He was moved from Loudon County Hospital to Knox County. So then there's where the lawsuit came in. Knox County sued us and said we were responsible for it. So that went on for what, a year or so?
About that.
And we, Harvey took us into executive session and told us that if this continued, first it come from what, $300,000 or $400,000?
200,000.
Whatever. It came to that to 100, they did. And then Harvey countered that with $50, or paying what, 50,000. And it went on and on after that. And we finally, as best I can recall, they took that. We paid them the money, and that was the settlement, because Harvey said if we went to court, we would lose, because it wasn't. It was us, because we were the ones that sent the fella for operation, a heart operation, to their hospital. And he said, you will lose, and you'll lose more than $50,000. And so we voted to pay the 50,000 on that. So that's a little history as to how it got to the shape that it was in on that one issue. It was, that was all that the county commission at that particular time asked to be included in it. And if you look at that 17 years ago, or ever how long it is at the present time, you will find that one sentence that that they were going to pay. They had added it to the contract that we both agreed with. So that's how that happened.
So I think Commissioner Shaver, back to your point, there is nothing about the treatment of county inmates in the agreement to expand, but there is apparently that side agreement that's in place for the charges being at 33 1/3, so.
So it will stand in place?
Is that superseded by this, or how's that work?
Well, it may not be a bad idea to
Can we just get it written into?
renew it or consider adding something, provision to that.
In the revised draft, I think we would, well, no, we would include a provision that says the existing agreement would just continue as it's written. Right, so I mean, that's what, as part of picking up these points that commission would like to see addressed, we would address it in the current document that we're negotiating at this time.
Good.
And what this one says, and I'm like, Bob, I've never seen this before, but it was before our term came on, just before, and it's signed by Joan Lovelace, who was then the purchasing agent, and it's surprisingly, it's signed by Tim Guider. But I don't believe this ever had a vote or anything.
Did Mayor Herron sign it?
I don't
If
see
it's
her
a
name.
that's a contract for services, technically, the purchasing director has full authority to sign that.
I would be, it doesn't matter or not, but I would be very doubtful had the commission known this was floating, that they wouldn't have had a vote on this one. This is kind of a big deal. But anyhow, if we get that in, now, if we could tune that thing on down there to about 30, 25, I mean, sky's the limit or the ground's the limit, so.
20.
What do you do on inmates, just out of curiosity? Is there ever a, Bob, and I'm looking at you too, an inmate comes in, I'm sure we have some people that are spending time in our new fine facility that actually has insurance, if an inmate comes in, are they asked for insurance like I would be if I go in?
Ultimately, yes. Jeffrey, you want to answer?
Of course, we would take the insurance and that would be the payment, and if there was none, we would go back to the contract. I've been listening to this for the last couple of minutes, and I kind of feel like the cat has the bird in the mouth, because I was in the middle of this storm when it happened. I'm actually the guy that interceded and said, I don't like this lawsuit, we're gonna stop it. And I called the then mayor, and I said, we have to diffuse this now. And then I called George Miller, who was one of our board members at Covenant, and he said, absolutely, you should. I said, well, it'd be a career limiting move, but I'm gonna jump in the middle of this train. I'm not gonna let this happen. So the decision was made that we would find common ground, which we did, okay? We agreed to a number that we could, would be far less than either side, had concerns with, and we agreed to that. Once that happened, then I said, never again. We don't want this to ever happen again. So I met with Sheriff Geiger, and I said, you're our friend. We're gonna help you and your colleagues, and this is our home. This is part of Covenant. This is part of our family. So let's work together. So Estelle said, let's get everybody together. So we got Chad Claybo from Covenant Health, myself. We had some other people from our home office. We sat down with the sheriff and Joan, and we hammered out an agreement. So we've got it in place. It's a services agreement, and we're honoring it. So it's there. Okay. So we'll never have that problem again.
You probably know how much, there's more than the sheriff's office involved in this. You wouldn't believe the indigent that passes through. Well, you would, because you
Yes, I
run the thing. But there's a lot of dollars spent on indigent.
And we do it all the time, every single day. They come through our emergency room constantly. You're right. Absolutely right. Yes, sir.
So I want to make sure I heard that correctly. If an inmate comes out of Loudon County Jail, you will ask for his medical insurance
Well, sure.
before
He
you
has
bill
insurance
the
coverage.
county?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you look at Covenant's annual report, the number for indigent care is enormous.
That's what we do. That's who we are.
Yeah, Covenant does several $100 million, believe it or not, dollars of free care a year. Our average margin is about 1.5%. Most folks would say that's not the kind of business you want to be in, but it is the business we're in and it's the business we love. So obviously in fact, Jeffrey's, our hospital here, from a payer mix standpoint, it's one of the more difficult payer mixes we have. The reason being is we don't have a lot of commercial, a very high Medicare. Medicare pays you right about cost. TennCare, which is our Medicaid program, pays you probably 60% of cost, and then you have self-pay that pay you 0. And so, Jeffrey, your average margin is probably a couple $100,000 a year, and sometimes that couple $100,000 a year is negative. But it's part of that's part of our whole system. And so we don't look at each individual facility and say, this one makes money, so it's good. This one doesn't make money, it's not. We don't look at our facilities and say, well, this one doesn't make money, so we don't put money in it. We put money in the facilities we need to for the communities. And so, I don't know at the top of my head, Jeffrey, the total amount of indigent care dollars you did last year, but it was very, very significant.
My question is to Bob. This will be voted on April 5th at the commission meeting. Will the documents be revised by then?
I think, so this is going to be, just thinking through this practically how it would work. Obviously, I think I'm hearing the commission say they'd like to try to get a figure lower than 33 1/3. I don't know whether Covenant's willing to do that. We got to consider the back and forth on how something like that would work. If you want to try to do a final approval of everything at your commission meeting in May, I guess you're going to have to.
Actually, the commission meeting in April.
April, that's right.
It's April 5th.
In April, I guess you'd have to say, just trust Chip and I to try to get that figure as low as we possibly can and present it at that meeting, and y'all voted up or down. Or if we had to push this another month for another workshop to bring back counter offers from Covenant, I think they'd be willing to do that, Doug, wouldn't you?
I'd be comfortable with you all as deep in the elbow deep in this thing as you are to work with, and I heard Jeff say how we're gonna all make it work, so if there is any give, I expect they'll give. If there's not, I expect they'll tell us there's not. But we
I agree with that. I
we
think
want
that's-
that number 8 taken out of the thing, you know, number 8 needs to come out regardless.
Yeah.
We don't pay for anything, that's the part.
They don't like writing checks to me. I will ask this question, that 33 1/3, is that equivalent to what Medicare pays? Is it close? Because there is a state statute that says, if I think this is correct, Doug, you correct me if I'm wrong, you know far more about healthcare law than I ever will. But isn't there a state statute that discusses the highest amount that a hospital can charge an indigent person? Isn't that set by state law? Isn't there a state statute on that?
There are some state statutes on that, right? I mean, we're, you know, here, we're charging, to some extent, charging the county for caring for a potentially indigent person in their custody.
Right.
It's a little bit different situation, but.
Right, I agree, because state law is really stacked against the county in this regard, folks, it really is. State law is pretty clear that,
I'm sure you all can talk it
yeah,
out.
I hope. I think we can, I think so.
This is something that comes up every year. We know we push for legislature change to cover some inmate costs, but that's about as far as it makes it from here to this table. It's just not a popular subject nationally, and with good cause. You're looking at spending money on inmates, and we've still got folks out here that aren't insured, so.
Well, let us go back and take a look at it. I can assure you with the number 33, it's not a win dollar. No one on our side is trying to make this, as a good payer mix within who pays us. And so let us take a look at it. Again, it's not something we're trying to financially do well on. We just need, we sure like to cover our costs.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I have talked with Dennis Rowe quite a bit, and for you that do not know, Dennis, would you stand and please tell what you do?
Dennis Rowe, I'm with the Priority Ambulance Corporation, and this is my community. We live in Loudon County, know, I think everybody here. Paramedic since 1978, and I've been blessed to be in this community, and fortunately I've worked in the hospital since I was 16 years old. When I scrubbed for surgery back when you could do that, they put me under the jail nowadays for what I was allowed to do back then, Dr. Sam and the cast of characters. I will tell you, I just got back from Wyoming. I've also, part of our corporation works with Baptist Memorial Hospital out of Memphis, both in the Memphis area, upper west Tennessee, and in Mississippi. And I can tell you categorically, you're blessed. Looking at some of those hospitals and doing some consulting with them, they're barely hanging on. You've got a hospital desiring to expand and grow. That says a lot for the financial strength as well as the belief in the community, because when you get into Fremont, Wyoming, for an example that I was just at, they have lost industry, they've lost population, they're trying to get that back, and one of the main investments they've made is in their hospital, trying to get it back up to speed. And I think most of you all know that industry depends on healthcare, schools, and road environments. So we've got interstates, we've got good schools, and we're building a healthcare system that is bar none one of the best in this area for this community. It's a community hospital, and that's extremely important. When you go there, my wife worked there for quite some time, and I can tell you that when you go there at all hours of the night, you get the right care, and I would not hesitate, as I have, to take my family there and be cared for. And that's a rarity in this environment now, and particularly as the further you get from a major metropolitan area, the more restricted healthcare becomes. So from a recruiting standpoint, just from a financial aspect, I can only encourage you strongly to do what you can. Commissioner Shaver is my commissioner, and I didn't worry much about reading most of the documents, but I was confident that he would. And he'll get the best he can. He'll strangle Lincoln, which is penny Lincoln and not the $5 bill either. But I can only strongly encourage you as somebody who's been in this healthcare system in a very young age. We are blessed, and it has helped us as a community build a very strong financial basis that people want to be at and enjoy the area that we have to serve. So I think this is a great thing. It attracts physicians. It attracts additional folks coming in, although sometimes I think we'd like to slow it down just a notch from an infrastructure standpoint. But it's great to have people wanting to be a part of us. And healthcare wise, and Henry, you know this as well as anybody, we take a lot of patients there and they get exceptional care. And that's not always the case in many areas of this country or this state for that matter. When you get in Mississippi, where people we work with at Baptist Memorial, there's some tough areas there. It's very hard, and they have a strong commitment themselves. But indigent care, it's tough for all of us, and it's a huge investment for most healthcare systems, particularly those that care. And I do believe strongly that Covenant Health believes, if you haven't had a chance, Google, trying to think of the radio announcer's name, Howard Hilton Hill, and look for Tony Spazia's talk. It's a 2-part talk. If you get a chance, watch that, and I won't ruin it for you, but he talks about the commitment that was made by Covenant himself, Mr. Vandersteen, who actually spent time in the Baptist Memorial system as well. It's a commitment, and I honestly believe, and by my own rambling forward, I think I'm trying to make sure I convince you that this is the right movement forward. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. This is a great community that deserves a great healthcare system.
Mr. Chairman, I asked Dennis to be here today, and Mr. Altshuler and Dennis were very helpful in setting up the priority ambulance service that we have now. Dennis and I, along with Travis Estes, have had quite a few discussions over the last, 2 months or whatever, and looking at another ambulance, because the 65, 75, 85 group of Loudon County, they're #1 in the state as far as heart condition, heart problems. And Dennis used a word, commitment. And I think by having and utilizing him, if we can get another ambulance in the county with priority, and by having all this together, I think it'll be a win-win situation for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I have a
Chairman?
question. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, Bob, I think anything that we can get below 33.3% would be wonderful. I know Medicare ends up only covering 80%, leaving 20% for the sole person, so I think anything that we can get below 33.3 would be much helpful.
My question is for Jeffrey. I heard about the private rooms. Are you going to expand the specialties, trauma, heart, anywhere along that line? Because that'll free up the ambulance going to Park West or downtown.
Let me just say that we have a lot of different things that we're doing to take care of the patients. And when a certain guy became CEO of Covenant, he lay awake at night wondering what was important, and he knew that it was about the patients. And so he made 11,000 people sign an oath that our patients are first. That's this guy right here. He did that, okay? And so that's kind of our mantra. So the Loudon County residents are first. We'll do whatever we have to do, Mr. Chairman, to take care of them. There's a lot of things that we've got right now. There's a lot of tools that we've been able to get, technologies that help us see things quickly. We use those. We have a gigantic system, though, of specialists everywhere within this region, and we want the patient to get the very best. So Jim talked a few minutes ago about a stroke patient and being able to use a catheter to be able to thread it deep inside the brain to remove the clot. Dr. Woodward, who we are associated with, is extremely gifted at Fort Sanders Regional. He actually has pioneered many of those procedures nationally. And Fort Loudon has actually had a patient where that occurred. We diagnosed the stroke quickly with the advanced technologies. We had $1 million CT that we were able to use with brain scan function. Incredible. At that point in time, only some 400 hospitals in the country had that type of program set up. Dr. Woodward helped us do it. We were able to get that patient, Dr. Woodward at Fort Sanders Regional, that was having a stroke, and they regained their movement on the table. We have advanced telemedicine services that we're looking at. We can actually beam a doctor live directly into the room to assess a patient. So not only are they physically present, and we'll do as much of that as we possibly can based on the volumes, but also we're connected with the system, so we make sure that the patient gets what they need when they need it, okay? And that's one of the reasons why people are having confidence in what it is that we do, because we know that they are who we care about, okay? So many times we do things locally with technologies and with physicians, but we leverage the power of our system. And you know, having been an administrator for more than 20 years, I've not seen a system like this. And I'm really proud to be twice aesthetic, okay? And so I think that you can be assured that if you come to Fort Loudon Medical Center, you're going to get the best that medical science can provide.
Can I add to that? Jeffrey?
What is the spectrum of surgical services that's offered now at the hospital? If you had to have, is there orthopedics, is there heart,
Yes, so
neuro?
we do orthopedic services at the hospital. We do surgery there with that. We have GI procedures that we do at the hospital as well. There are cardiac procedures like a transesophageal echocardiography,
Right.
where you have the patient sedated and you put the object down inside to look. We have podiatry, we have general surgery, of course. So we have plastic surgery. There's a whole array of things that we
Do
provide.
you have obstetrics and
We do not
gynecology?
deliver babies there, although, having said that, they do show up in the emergency room. We deliver them there sometimes, guys, okay, when they can't make it to Knoxville, but we do not have an obstetrical program there.
Now, do you bring, I know you have resources, and I know applying medical services has changed over the years, so if you have a patient here at Lenore City at your hospital, do you bring the doctor to them if you don't have what they need, or do you send them to another facility?
So that depends on the time frame. It depends on what's going on. So as an example, on that case that I was talking about where we diagnosed stroke, and we looked at what the scenario was, the clot was too large to remove. It requires something called the biplane technology, which is incredibly expensive. So Covenant doesn't have the resources to put biplane in every single hospital.
Right.
So we focus it in one hospital and provide the resources there so we can make sure that it's first class. The second thing that happens in medicine is you have to have enough volume of patients to drive a quality program. So they use that biplane technology all the time, and it gets their skill set up extremely high. So sometimes in scenarios like that, we would bring the patient there, okay? Other times, like with GI, Dr. Benitez and Dr. Christ, our GI physicians, they'll come to the bedside, and we'll be doing procedures at Fort Loudon Medical Center there. So it just depends on what the scenario is.
Jeffrey, let me answer the question a little further. It's a good answer. So about 10 years ago, when Morristown Hamlin Hospital, they was owned by the county, and they were looking toward the future, and they knew they had significant capital needs going forward, the facility, technology, on and on. And so they wanted to get a partner that would actually own the hospital, and they interviewed us, they interviewed St. Mary's and UT. We won, and it was interesting having conversations during discussion as well as afterwards. And the reason we won was this. Our goal of Covenant is not to have hospitals outside of Knoxville and bring everything into Knoxville. We want to bring into Knoxville what cannot be done well in outlying areas. In fact, the hospital in Morristown at the time that they became part of Covenant actually had a NICU, which is a place you take care of high-risk babies. And during that discussion, it kind of goes back to what Jeffrey said, if you can't do enough of something to keep your staff competencies, so you want to make sure whatever you do, you can do enough to be good. In other words, do open heart surgery, you probably need to do about 150 to 200 a year to do it well. Well, you have to have the demographics to do it, to keep the staff trained, to have the physicians, and then obviously also as well to economically make it make sense. So if you think about the future Fort Loudon Medical Center, as Jeffrey said, we're actually going to do more out here because we're able to connect now physicians virtually. We're able to do, so most hospitals, especially outlying hospitals, they cannot have enough neurologists to take care of their patients. So what do? We connected them virtually so they actually, the doctor can see the patient can see the doctor, they can see the vital signs. In June, we will kick off what we're calling EICU, which is a way that we will be able to monitor all of our ICUs across our system. We'll still have staff there, we'll still have doctors in the hospital, we'll be able to monitor all those patients in a centralized location with a physician. What that's going to allow us to do is to keep more patients in the outlying areas. And so the decisions we make are always in the best interest of the patient. Can we give the patient good care? Can we keep the staff competent? And in all honesty, can you do enough where it makes sense?
Well, have y'all identified areas of things that you want to add to the current hospital? Have you got some of those identified, or?
Jeffrey and I on occasion, obviously, as you look at what we offer today, we offer a pretty expanded service for the size of the hospital that it is.
Right.
And the fact that it is so close to Park West, occasionally Jeffrey might say it creates a disadvantage, but it also creates a lot of advantage because you have specialty care that can come from Park West. I think there are services that we can look into the future. Jeffrey and I have had discussions many times about GYN. We haven't quite figured it out yet, but services like that we can offer, again, that the community needs. There's enough volume to make it make sense. But yes, we will always continue to ask that question.
What's the census run at the hospital?
What are you running, Jeffrey? Of course, you asked last year. That's a crazy question in light of COVID, but what is your normal?
Last year about 30, sometimes it goes down to 25, but a large part of that problem is private rooms, because that's the single biggest reason why ambulance patients would not want to stop, because they want to go to where there's a private room. So, you know, I got a feeling I'm going to fill up all the rooms we're about to get.
So right now you think just the expanding into private rooms is gonna be the main help?
That'll be a huge issue. And again, I'd ask you all, if you had the choice, and for our community, you know, Park West, Pickett, there's a lot of hospitals that are not far from this community. If you could choose, you're sick, do you want to be in a semi-private room or a private room? So I believe there are some people who do not come to our hospital because we don't have a private room.
I've talked to Mr. Fike about this, and I think if you can look and work toward a level 3 trauma center, orthopedic, GI, anesthesia, having those individuals on call within 30 minutes, you think that could be obtainable?
Here's what I would
Foreseeable
tell
future?
you. Jeffrey meets Fort Loudon meets the criteria for level 3.
Okay,
In all honesty, it's a little bit of a banner you can put up. And
right.
in all honesty, maybe confuse people a little bit. Well, level 3 trauma is Jeffrey takes care of gunshot wounds, car wrecks. We have subspecialists on call. And so really, there's little of anything that's in there. It's used as much, my personal perspective, as a marketing ploy as anything. Obviously, when you get to level 1, that's a completely different ballgame.
I think Blount County is no longer a level 3, if I'm not mistaken. Now, maybe.
I think they were and they dropped it.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a couple more and then
Yes.
I'll be done.
Yes.
I know there've been a lot of calls from the village for the delivering babies. If I'm not mistaken, Henry, don't shout.
We're on camera.
Short answer. When do you expect the construction to start on the addition?
Short answer.
And I'm holding you to nothing, just
Now, Jeffrey.
this year, next year, 5
Next
years?
year. So the plan, depending on how we move forward, let's say in April, if we can get that done. We got a planning process.
Bob's good, he'll get it done.
This, Mr. Friends, baby to raise, to birth,
He
not
is
me.
good, he is
So
good.
there's a
Larry.
planning process to go through. The good news is we don't have to get a CON anymore. That was one of the changes that was made in certificate of need. I would think you would start sometime late next year.
Late next year, okay.
And it won't, we have no reason to delay it. So bottom line is it'll, once we're comfortable.
I thought you'd break ground next month when we
No.
voted on it, that thing to do.
Obviously, as you can imagine, I gotta go to a board of trustees, who's aware I'm here today,
Yeah.
and is aware of what I'm doing, is extremely supportive. In fact, the chairman of my board lives here, Jay Fitzsimmons, and, vice chair of, one of my other committees lives here as well. So there's a lot of personal interest of us being here tonight, by our board.
Last one, and this may cloud things a little, and I'm gonna defer to Commissioner Mears. At our last workshop, we were talking about this meeting, and you all weren't here, so we got to really talk about you quite a bit. We all talked about what we'd really like to see come out of this, and Commissioner Mears mentioned something about potentially some type of health care or nursing type scholarships. Is that something you've had a conversation with them about?
I asked Mr. Fike for
Out of
7
this agreement?
at first, and I think it was negotiated down to 3. And Jeffrey, you want to help on that?
Yeah, here's what we talked about, just so you know, and we kind of had some discussion with the mayor about it, and what might be most interesting in helping to the schools. What we talked about is, my understanding is there's sort of 3 schools.
3 high
Correct, 3 high schools. That Covenant annually give each school $5,000 to use to help scholarship someone. So the, would kind of be a fun process to work with the schools to say who gets the scholarship this year. So that we would scholarship someone, we would prefer for it to be nurses. It could be potentially other healthcare workers, preferably nurses, because we really, really, really need nurses.
Loudon County currently, numbers of students that are being served in the HOSA program have 80, and Greenback has 35. And talking with Mr. Guerin, he was there at the meeting that day. I think it could be a win-win, and also maybe a co-op program, which I think you have currently with Lenore City. If we could expand that to Loudon and Greenback, I think that would be even better for us in the future as well.
So what we at least agreed to, what we talked about was all 3 schools receive $5,000 a year from Covenant Health. Again, we prefer for it to be nurses because they're in such incredible need. And part of it would be that they at least come first to us.
Please.
I'm sure Dennis would like them to be EMTs and paramedics.
Actually, there's a championship team at Loudon this year that's in the state
Hey,
competition.
Jeffrey, we could use some heated blankets down here because this man freezes us all to death, so.
It's just now borderline country.
Well, I wanna make sure, just for posterity, because this is really wonderful information and thoughts of the future, that this thing that we're here to talk about today, that all the questions have been asked and answered, correct? Anybody?
That's what a workshop's for.
I just wanna make sure that this right here, because Van had some really great questions, very specific questions, and I was just making sure that.
Bob, do you
was-
think this is a win-win
Yeah.
for the county?
Win-win?
Well, I'll say this, I think it is, and I'll tell you this, it's been a pleasure to deal with Jim, and Jeffrey, and Doug Campbell. They've been, just absolutely superb to work with. I don't think the issues that Chip and I raised with the agreements were, of any surprise to them, or when we did raise the issue and say why this is concerned, they readily agreed to it. So, they certainly, from our perspective, I think Covenant is working for the best interests of Loudon County.
Mayor, do you feel the same way?
When I told my board that we wanted to do this, most of my board members didn't know it was leased. And the reason that's important is the way our board has treated this hospital here is it's ours.
That's kind of the way, when Jeffrey come to me, how long ago, 14 months? 12, at least 12 months. COVID's put everything kind of a year behind. My first question was, I didn't realize we owned any of it. And so the more we've got into it, the more we've looked at the future. First and foremost, Loudon County sure don't want the hospital business. We don't want the hospital business or the ambulance business. We'll leave that to professionals. But I think this is that opportunity. If you borrow a car, you're not gonna put brakes on it. And so, if we turn all this over to Covenant, it gives them the reason and the peace of mind to keep it rolling, to keep it modern, to keep it profitable, as much as the hospital can be profitable. And, some of the horror stories I hear from around the state where, you hear mayors complaining they're complaining about their ambulance service, only because any trip in ambulance is a minimum 30 minutes, sometimes an hour away. If you have a car wreck, these places are out without ambulance for 2 hours, hour there, hour back. At no point in Loudon County can we not be at our hospital. It'll still be our hospital, even though we don't have the land. Be at our hospital, usually the longest probably 25 to 30 minutes, once they're picked up. And that would be from probably Blue Springs, and Greenback's a little bit of a trickier sport because there's just no easy access. But I think for the county to enter this partnership and give this land back to Covenant and let them expand where they want to expand, I think it makes us livable. I think it makes us attractive. Because where are we growing? We're one of the oldest median states and we're the oldest median counties in the state of Tennessee. We're not getting any younger, myself included. And I still, look where we're growing up. We're really growing in the village as well. But we're not growing just in the village. We're going everywhere. We're getting retirees is who we're getting. And I think it makes us that much more attractive to know that they're within sometimes 5 to 10 minutes, if not closer, a max of probably 20 minutes out from the hospital.
Well, I just got one more question. It doesn't really have anything to do with this. I'd just like a little history lesson on, does the current hospital, does it trace back to what, this was the old Bacon Hospital?
Yes.
And it was set up like a lot of them were then by the county. The county built and
For many, many years, the county had a hospital committee. Harold Duff served on it. Every commission meeting, much of the meeting was taken up with problems at the hospital. Doctors, everything the county commission dealt with. I don't know what year it went from being that to actually being a corporate operated hospital. I don't have a clue on that one, but yes, you read the old minutes, Harold was in on it.
so we went from Bacon, it closed, and then what?
Lenore City. No, they built the second
Bacon
one.
was, and then the second one,
Yeah,
because I have documentation, my grandfather
The
was a
second
doctor.
one, what? Second one where?
Right beside it.
Right
The
beside
old
it,
hospital.
it's the one that is the assisted living now,
River
Okay.
Grove.
And then it went from that to where we're at now,
Lenore City.
Lenore City?
yes.
And my guess is the lease issue, obviously nobody's gonna tell her don't know it, but those that wasn't here, David was here, I was here, Harold was here. The ideal of the hospital leaving Loudon and going to Lenore City would have been no less traumatic if Loudon High School had left Loudon and moved to Lenore City.
Yeah.
It was huge.
It was huge.
David can tell you, I mean,
remember that too.
If we had tore down the courthouse the first day it burned, it would have been that, there was nearly fist fights over it, so I don't know if the lease had something to do with that, but it was a bailiwick by all means, but yes, old hospital, it's important because that's where I was born, Bacon. Then the next one they built right beside it, and they ran them both for a while, and then after they closed the top one, it was all downstairs, down the hill, and into Lenore City, so that's.
So when did like I said, the county was a major player on the
Yes,
front end?
ran the whole thing.
And when they left over there, then they,
I don't know.
Went to Covenant, yeah.
Do y'all know when Covenant took over our operations? I really don't. Since the 90s, I guess, wasn't it?
All right, so, just read the document about an hour ago, to refresh my memory, because it does go back a lot of years. When Covenant was in its early stages of being born, it called itself the Fort Sanders Alliance, okay? Fort Sanders Alliance signed an agreement to lease the hospital in December of 1988, okay? And so I believe Keith Altshuler may have been involved with that, and let's talk about it just a little bit. And that's when, the program of caring about this community started, and it hasn't stopped. And we continue to put money into that project in the new hospital.
I just wanted to get the historical facts right. Like I said,
It's interesting to.
well, I just know that a lot of hospitals will operate like Blunt. In Blunt County, it was, and it may still have a board, but the county is actually the major.
Of the 500 largest hospitals in the country in Forbes magazine this year, Covenant ranked 38. Now, the state of Tennessee, I think, currently ranks something like 43rd in the nation as far as healthcare. So, and if you look, the nurses, 500 nurses that you have currently employed, 450 of them have gone for advanced degrees with Covenant. And they're very happy.
Moving right along.
Are there any further questions from the commissioners?
Jeffrey, I believe that Covenant was in charge when the move took place from Loudon to up here.
Yes.
That's correct. I arrived in September of 2004, and the hospital was under construction, and we moved in November of 2004.
By the way, my comments that I made earlier in it as a follow-up to Commissioner Shaver here doesn't indicate that I'm against this, because I am for it 100%. Just part of the discussion that was at that time. As a matter of fact, there's people in Loudon still hate me. They think I was the one that did that. I got a comment here last week about, you was the one that brought this up there. It was this group here. I was the go-between, but I got the credit for it.
Okay, no further questions?
Go home.
All right. I'm gonna rely on Bob to let me know when the paperwork is done so we can vote on this. The next voting meeting will be April 5th. To the people from Covenant, to Bob, to everybody in the room, I don't see a downside to this at all. I think it's a big benefit to Loudon County and its citizens, and I commend Covenant for making such an investment. Thank you.
All right. All right. Tammy,
Thanks, Bob.
put on your, go ahead. There you go.